Hey, so there is this video that keeps popping up in my recommended titled How the Internet Fell Out of Love with Brendon Urie. I found that to be a very intriguing title, and so I want to watch it. I was a diehard Panic at the Disco fan up until like the age of 19 maybe, until some things came up. I'm not sure if they'll be covered in this video. I don't really know like what angle she's coming at this from, but I'm excited to hear it. I really just decided that I wasn't actually a fan anymore after his most recent album because it wasn't the best. And then you add on just like the weird Brendon Urie like cringe, just like weird things he's done. It all just adds up and makes him kind of unlikable.
Because unfortunately, Panic at the Disco is a very personal subject for me.
Okay, I think we're all feeling that way. What I'll say with these artists who are now being exposed for whatever reason, you shouldn't feel bad for liking the music back then, and honestly you shouldn't feel bad for liking the music now. It's just being able to separate the person from the art. It doesn't change the way that we felt about the music when we were experiencing it in a positive way.
I remember when I first heard them. I was in elementary school when I Write Sins Not Tragedies came on the radio, and my dad always really liked it. And when I got an iPod Touch, I was able to check out the album that the song had come from.
Aww. I don't know what she's about to say, but I'm just gonna say that album is very, very important to me still, even now. And part of the reason why I'm able to like reconcile that in my mind is that I know a lot of the lyrics and concepts and things weren't necessarily Brendon's idea. They were other people's ideas, perhaps who was supposed to be the front man of the band before he was shoved out, Ryan Ross. No matter what anybody says about this album, I'm still gonna get down to Time to Dance when it comes on in my car. I don't care.
From there, I went all of the natural places that a person in my demographic could go. Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Warped Tour, Hot Topic, Chunky Bracelets, Tumblr.
You were cooler than me. I wasn't allowed to do all of that. My parents were not about that. Well, I did have like the band bracelets in high school. I did do that. I did do like the merch and stuff, but I wasn't really allowed to like do anything like too like dark, I guess. I don't know. I think my parents were a little scared of that. And actually, I started with Fall Out Boy, so I did it backwards, and then I got into Panic at the Disco. They didn't want certain things for me, and I think they were worried about the emo culture at the time. There were a lot of negative things in the culture that at that time that were being promoted and not talked about in a healthy way. I get it. I guess. I was a young child.
I, of course, find the majority of it to be incredibly goddamn cringe, but nonetheless, it was a trajectory that would not have happened had I not discovered this band.
At one point, I wanted to get a tattoo dedicated to this band. I cannot tell you how glad I am that I didn't do that.
Since then, I've seen them several more times, and each time the band had different members on stage. Like how the Wiggles had a different Yellow Wiggle for a while, and then they went back to the original Yellow Wiggle.
There is a video about the evolution of the Wiggles, and I have to say it's like the most intriguing thing I've ever watched. If I can find the link to it again. It was from a while ago I watched it, but I found it so fascinating. Maybe it was actually about the amusement park that was like Wiggles themed. It was very, very interesting.
But at the center of it all is one man. One man who went from an emo heartthrob to a Vine star to a quirky Broadway lead with a Taylor Swift song credit under his belt. And for those of you who are just as deep in the Panic at the Disco lore as I am, and you want to know just how qualified I am for a video like this,
show me.
Well,
show me, girl. Oh. You didn't have to do that. I cannot believe you just did that. I love you. You're awesome.
Panic at the Disco was an American pop rock band from Las Vegas, Nevada, formed in 2004 by childhood friends Ryan Ross, Spencer Smith, Brent Wilson, who was later replaced by bassist John Walker, and of course Brendon Urie. Of course there's I Write Sins, which is the song that everyone knows, but the whole album is really quirky and also full of this raw, guttural emotion.
Along with that, I would also say that their music videos were very different compared to like other bands of the time. I mean, well, I guess Fall Out Boy did have like the Sugar We're Going Down video, which had like the interesting concept or whatever, but the one that always comes to mind for me is the video for Lying Is the Most Fun. That video, that's what I wanted to get a tattoo of, is like the fish tank on the girl's head. Maybe I should still do it, I don't know.
After the success of Fever, we only got one more album with this core four. Their sophomore album was called Pretty Odd, and it definitely lives up to its title. It's very cerebral, it's very heavily inspired by the music of the 60s, it sort of has a Beatles or Beach Boys tone in particular, and it's definitely beloved by a lot of Panic fans, but not exactly by the band itself. The album only had one big commercially viable hit, which is 9 in the Afternoon, which I believe is also the first song of theirs that was featured on Guitar Hero or Rock Band, which led to this awkward interview if I'm not mistaken.
I hate every song on Guitar Hero now.
Well, that's weird because we covered one on Guitar Hero, so
Yeah, well,
that's cool.
I hate it.
Liar.
Yeah, it's kind of a sensitive subject now.
Oh.
I'm just kidding.
See, and this is a perfect example of some of the stuff that people are now starting to talk about in regard to this. Like this, Ryan genuinely seems very uncomfortable in this moment. And look at Brendan's face. He does not care. I think that he has like no concept of like social boundaries.
The band's guitarist and lyricist Ryan Ross and bassist John Walker wanted to go in this direction for their sound permanently, whereas drummer Spencer Smith and Brendon Urie didn't necessarily want to go back to their pop-punk roots with Fever, but rather wanted to find a different way to progress their sound forward. And so the band split. Ryan and John formed a side project called The Young Vanes, and Brendon and Spencer kept the Panic at the Disco moniker for their third album. Vices and Virtues was Panic's first venture as a duo. It definitely tries to build on the vibe of Fever, but instead of a circus freak show vibe, I get more of noir meets steampunk.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, going back now, it feels very like commercial to me. I don't know why. Like the way that it sounds is like, I don't know. All I can think of is Ready to Go and how that song was in like a ton of ads at the time, like commercial ads, like television advertisements. Wow, I cannot speak. I'll just say this. The only album that I listen to now that's technically by Panic at the Disco is their first album.
The tour for Vices and Virtues ended in 2012, and Brendon, Spencer, and Dallin recorded the band's fourth studio album, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die. And this is where the train starts to fall off the tracks just a little bit.
I don't know. It might have been falling off before that. Like that clip that we saw earlier of him like making Ryan super uncomfortable is like example of some of the things that have been coming out.
While the trio recorded the project together, this was the first time the marketing and overall concept was very Brendon-centric, which is evident by the album art where he is the only one present.
And you know what's crazy? I fucking loved this album when it came out. I can't remember how old I was. Was I like 13? Something like that? At this point, I was old enough to like be on the internet and like listening to my own music and pirating my own music. In my brain, they had broken up. I think I liked it so much just because a band that I had just started to get into in my adolescence had returned, and I was there for the return. Because all the other bands that I liked, I wasn't really too present for the return. Like Paramore, I kind of fell off liking them, and now I love them again, but I kind of fell off liking them, so I wasn't really there for their return. And then Fall Out Boy, it was kind of, well, I don't know, I guess I was there for that. It was just Panic at the Disco hit different for me. I don't know why. I think it also had to do with the fact that I was I had a huge crush on Brendon Urie. When you're a closeted gay boy in a little town, the obsession with like random men was like on another level. It probably doesn't help that he was kind of queer baiting like all the time, and so I think that was an intentional decision on Brendon's part. I don't know.
That for the first time there were a couple of mumbles of like, why doesn't Brendon Urie just go solo? Although that criticism didn't really pick up until a little later on. And the other was because Brendon Urie, like a lot of celebrities at this point around 2013,
I don't remember him being so present on Vine. Like, I didn't realize that he was just deadass a Viner for a little bit. He kind of did like a backwards Tyler the Creator pipeline, right? He like was he's a musician who then got into Vine. And I feel like Tyler the Creator is a musician, but he was like an internet star first, or like a comedian first in a way. I don't know.
But at the time, it was a rather influential tool for celebrities as they could use it to post silly downtime videos. And Brendon seemed to always be pretty charming and goofy, and his videos got a lot of hits. A lot of Brendon's good fortune then carried into the band's next album, Death of a Bachelor, but by this point, there was definitely quite a bit of speculation as to when Brendon Urie would drop the delusion that he was still in a band, especially because it seemed pretty definite that Spencer wasn't going to return, plus Dallin reverted to being being just a touring member rather than
The
a more
delusion.
prominent- But it didn't necessarily matter who was in the band. For all intents and purpose, every album so far was made by a slightly different band anyway. And,
Yeah,
you know, going solo
true.
was a big career move. Maybe he just thought it would be a more profitable venture to stick with the same name and branding.
Is Brendon Urie just like a more involved DJ Khaled? Maybe that's an unbased claim. I don't know.
Certainly better than Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, in my opinion, and probably the last of Panic's albums that are definitely good. And while Panic keeps chugging out albums with various levels of identity crises, Brendon himself is becoming a bigger and bigger star. And in 2019, he was featured on Taylor Swift's Worst Song.
Oh, I love you so much, Taylor, but that... Period.
And I mean, I guess he had no reason to not continue doing this because it hadn't harmed him in any way commercially.
You're so
He was
right.
putting out music and people were still listening to it.
Yup.
And he had a number of side projects that he could go back to if he ever got bored. But in the music industry, all it takes is one slip up.
Because it's like, depending on who it is, it's like, we either all dogpile on them for something that wasn't that big of a deal, but it was like cringy, or we dogpile on them because they're like cringe, plus they did something that's like actually morally wrong. So I think it goes like both ways, sort of.
Had to have high hopes for a living. That bullshit, yeah, that song, that's what I'm talking about. I wish I could play it for you, but I fucking can't. Okay, let's back up a teeny bit here. In 2018, Panic at the Disco released an album called Pray for the Wicked. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I've ever gotten fully through.
That's an album? I thought it was like throwaways or something. It feels weird to be like bullying one of my like teen idols, but my god, I cannot forgive him for this album. Like, it's so fucking bad. And then he followed it up with another dumpster fire. Like,
But one of the songs in that project, called High Hopes, got picked up by the campaign of then presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg,
Oh.
the least cool presidential candidate that could possibly pick up your song. And on top of that, they created an incredibly cringy dance for his staffers to perform while on the campaign trail. This was Brendon Urie putting out mediocre, cookie-cutter, elevator music. In 2020, once High Hopes Gate had kind of dissipated, Breezy Weeks, wife of former Panic at the
Look at
Disco
Pete back
bass player
there.
Dallin Weeks,
I
accused
still
the
love Pete
band's
once.
bodyguard Zach Hall of sexual harassment. Following this revelation, a number of users on Twitter began to accuse Brendon himself of a similar kind of harassment, although it's worth noting that a number of these accusations were made in tweets that have since been deleted. Around this time, a clip also surfaced of Brendon giving some questionable stage banter, and definitely in the earlier times that I've seen Panic live, this was pretty much par for the course in every show.
We leave you with this thought. If I see you after the show, I'm gonna fuck you.
I forgot about that clip. This is what happens when you give a Mormon kid from Vegas a punk band to be in, a pop punk band to be in. Oh my god, I forgot about this. Brendan, you can't say that to your...
And I don't care if you want it. I don't care
Oh,
if you don't want it. Because then I really want it.
it only gets worse.
I really want it, bro.
In another controversial moment, Urie made a comment saying, quote, "I wish I was born black so I could wear the clothes that I wear without getting made fun of." He is also seen
What?
mouthing the N-word in an old Vine.
Walking through the motherfucking neighborhood, you knew when you got with the nigga, he already had a woman.
He also reportedly said a transphobic slur, which he later apologized for. Brendon also eventually did fire the security guard that was
I
accused-
forgot about all of these. Damn. I think maybe the music was so bad that it like overshadowed his allegations. He's probably one of those people that still uses the word like urban in conversation. The urban style, if you will.
So Brendon is the closest to cancellation that he has ever gotten, but the story doesn't end there. Still under the name Panic at the Disco for some godforsaken reason, he releases the band's final album for now, Viva Las Vengeance. Now, this is also an album that I haven't been able to bring my...
Same. I actually haven't listened to every song. So the first time I listened to it, I just turned it off because I was like disappointed and sad. It was like a sad moment for me. Then the second time I tried to listen to it, it was so I could give it like an honest chance. And I think I fell asleep. And then the third time I tried to listen to it, I was in a car and it was turned off. Yeah.
myself to listen to all the way through. Mostly
But
because
Slay,
it's
look at that
bad,
jacket
but
he's
also
got
as a
on.
hard-
Looking like a fucking Muppet.
The thing is that up until this point, no one ever contested that Brendon Urie could sing. He is vocally very talented. It became clear that in some way or another, Brendon Urie has been straining his voice to the point where in some situations, it actually sounds unrecognizable. There are hundreds of clips like this floating around on the internet right now, and I'm not a professionally trained singer, but I've listened to videos of professionally trained singers explaining what's going wrong here, and basically, he's straining the shit out of his voice to the point that it's causing actual damage to his vocal cords.
There's a clip of him somewhere explaining how he takes the care of his vocal cords very seriously and how he like won't eat certain foods and like all this shit. I wish I could find it, but I can't find it, unfortunately. No, how long has that been like that? I'm so sorry. I did not realize that the text giving you credit for the video had moved. I apologize.
So basically, all of Viva Las Vengeance got panned by critics, and it was clear that Brendon needed a break. I mean,
That
he pretty
girl,
much did
she
the
deserves
tour for
something,
every single Panic
wherever
album that
she
has
is.
been released. Brendon went kind of quiet after all of these allegations came to light, and also the poor reception to Viva Las Vengeance. And then in January of 2023, he posted on Instagram that the emo pop band that began in 2004, Panic at the Disco, was ending its run after 7 albums and nearly 2 decades of making music. When this announcement came out, I weirdly enough didn't feel anything.
Same.
Which is interesting considering that this band has meant a lot to me over the years.
Right.
But by the time this announcement came around, it didn't feel like it was the same band at all. I mean, obviously it wasn't. The only constant throughout these 2 decades was Brendon. Ultimately, I am still grateful for Panic at the Disco's existence. I hold Fever as an album in my heart quite fondly, and I probably always will. I hope
agree with
Ryan
you.
Ross is doing well, and I hope most of all that now you understand why the internet fell out of love with Brendon Urie.
I think it's important to remember with these bands and people who have kind of fallen out of good graces with the public that the positive memories and positive feelings that you had initially to their artwork is not in any way invalidated by the things that they have done since then.
That's all for me, you guys, and I'll see you next time.
I'm sure I will be back at some point. That was very good.